Welcome to the latest episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Cooper of the Catalyst Coaching Institute. And if you enjoy endurance sports, today's guest, three-time Ironman world champ Crowie Alexander, requires no introduction. He is one of the legends in the sport of triathlon whose humility is as powerful as his generational physical gifts. We released an unedited video version of this episode previously at youtube.com/coaching channel, and it immediately shot to the top of the list in terms of views. You'll love hearing from this true champion. You'll soak in the stories he shares, especially the one about missing his special needs bag at the turnaround point at Hawaii at the World Championship and what happened next. It's a story I will never forget the rest of my life. For those looking to pursue a certification as a health and wellness coach, our next certification fast track weekend that's part of the larger certification process is coming up March 20th and 21st. These programs usually feel early, so please don't wait too long if this is a priority for you. All the details at catalystcoachinginstitute.com, and we're always happy to set up a call to answer any of your questions if that would be helpful. Email results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com and we'll get something set up. Now it's time to take a ride with three-time Ironman world champ Crowie Alexander on the latest episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast. Crowie Alexander, five-time world champion. Welcome to the Catalyst Health, Wellness, Performance Coaching Podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I've looked forward to this for a long time. You've had an amazing career since you towed the line. Your first triathlon, December of 1993. Let's dig into the memory vault a little bit. Most memorable race of all time. And I know that you've got a lot to choose from there, but if you're going to go to one, what would it be?
It is hard.
Oh, yeah. Which is a good thing.
Picking just one. Yeah. I guess the obvious ones are the world titles, but each race has its own significance for different reasons. And one race that I always look back on fondly is the Lifetime Fitness race in Minnesota.
I remember that.
2005. Yeah. So obviously people remember it as it was a unique format, Battle of the Sexes, and at the time it was the highest prize purse in the history of triathlon.
250K or so?
Yeah. So it was a big payday, but that's not the reason. Two reasons it stands out for me. Firstly, it was an invitation-only race. So just to get in, you had to submit your resume. It was a whole process. And then you were racing the best guys and girls in the world. And it was a unique format. They had this equalizer formula that they used to look at all the Olympic distance triathlon results for the preceding 12 months and come up with one number. And it was based on the average differential between first male, first female, the top 10 in all these different races. Right. And it spat out one number. That was what they called the equalizer. That was the head start that the ladies would get. And then the men would stand on the beach, watch the clock count down and chase. So you had to, it was one of those unique.
It was a great race.
Where, you were racing the men, but you were also racing the women, right? If that makes sense.
Right.
And so it was a particularly good memory for me because it was one of the best fields I ever raced in. At that time, triathlon had been in the Olympics in Sydney and Athens, so both Olympic gold medalists were there. Actually, all the medalists from the year before in Athens were there, gold, silver, and bronze. It was a coming together of the short course guys, the middle distance, and the Ironman guys and girls. So it was a unique race in that aspect. And also, I'd just become a dad. Neri and I just had
that's right.
Just had our first child, Lucy, and she was 8 weeks old. So all those things really just went into the blender to make it such just a unique recipe. And it's a race that I was walking on clouds anyway, being a new dad. But from a professional standpoint, the validation I got winning that race, and financially as well, I guess, triathlon's a niche sport. It's not golf or football. Right. And so when you win, $250,000 in one race, particularly being a new dad, it takes a lot of
college is covered.
So
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I'm looking at the dates. You won the 70.3 then in 06 and your first Kona in 08. So that was kind of the springboard, or did you feel like that was a springboard into, hey, I was the best in the world on this day and let's do that again?
Yeah, it's an interesting mindset, when you think I'd won a few big races up until that point. Like the year before in '04, before I won Lifetime Fitness, I'd won what they called the Triple Crown. So that was Chicago, Boston, and LA, three big Olympic distance races on consecutive weekends. And you beat some big names. I'd won some Crowie a couple of times up to that point. I'd won a couple of national titles back home in Australia. But I think when you win a race like the one in Minnesota that had the two previous Olympic champions, all the world champions, just that high-end caliber field, yeah, it does something for your confidence.
Right.
And just makes you feel like you belong at that level. I mean, I think that's what every athlete and every person yearns for in their life, is sort of a sense of that they're doing a good job. So, yeah, I would say it was a springboard because it gave me a lot of confidence going into '06. And, it's interesting. You mentioned my first world title in '06, which was at the half Ironman distance. And when I won that world title, I don't think I'd lost a race at half Ironman for 4 or 5 years, but there was actually no officially sanctioned world championships until '06. So, yeah, so fast forward 1 year in '06 and winning that, and that gave me more validation. And it's just a nice feeling to really perform well. It wasn't even the winning. It was just, as an athlete, I always felt I got the most satisfaction from really great performances on the big occasions. And so obviously I got that in '05 with Minnesota, and then in '06 I had a couple of good wins culminating with that world title. So yeah, I would say Minnesota was the mental springboard that I needed at that point in my career.
Oh, very cool. And then most discouraging race of all time. It was, as you think back, what was one where you just went, if only? You only get one of these two.
How long have we got? How long have we got? Because everyone likes to talk about the world titles, but that's a long and distinguished list, that one.
For all of us.
Yeah, there were a lot of, being an athlete, it's like being in business. It's like having shares in the stock market. It's just a roller coaster, and your hope is that you're trending up.
Right.
But even if you're trending up, there's peaks and troughs. And I remember it was the late '90s, and I'd had a couple of races. I'd only just finished my uni degree in '97, where I qualified with a bachelor's degree in physiotherapy. And later that year, I went and raced internationally for the first time, and you get some good results. But like a lot of young athletes, I was inconsistent. Like I would get a top 5 and think, this sport's not so bad. And then I'd get a 25th the next week and think,
never mind.
I think when when you're young, you have, I guess, great physical tools, but mentally, maybe your mental development's not on par. And I know certainly for me, it wasn't at that point in my career. I hadn't quite figured out the training I needed to do to be consistent, and also just the thought processes in race week. How to taper properly, the mindset on race day, making decisions in the race. I hadn't figured all of that out. And sometimes when I had good results, it was almost good luck rather than good management. And I think the hope is in sport that you get to a place where physically you're in great shape and mentally you know how to make the best use of that.
Right.
And you're able to replicate the smart decisions, and with experience you learn certain things. So I remember in the late '90s, it was announced that triathlon was going into the Olympic Games, and it was going to be in my hometown of Sydney. And I never really gave myself a chance to make it because I felt, all these guys are better than me. All the guys at the world level, they've been racing world championships for 10 years. Some of them had won multiple world championships. My mindset was always, I'm behind the 8 ball.
Right, I'm not quite there.
University.
Yeah,
I'm not quite there. I started this sport late. These guys are better than me. They started in the sport in high school, came through the junior ranks. I didn't do that. I started as a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. I don't have their background. I'm not as good. I don't have their experience. And in the end, I was never good enough at that point to make that team for Sydney, the Australian team, but I wasn't far off either. And I remember driving home after one of the lead-in races thinking, I was very discouraged because I clearly didn't have an understanding of the sport. And that's when I was starting to understand that there was a mental side to it. Physically, I wasn't far off, but I'd written myself off months and months before it. And I'm thinking, well, why did I even bother turning up then? So that was very discouraging. it was discouraging and encouraging at the same time, because it was a bit of a breakthrough as well, in that I was discouraged at how quickly I'd folded up the tents and gone home. And then seeing that, I certainly, as I said, I didn't deserve to be on the team, but I was in the ballpark. And I just thought, I've got so much to learn here. I've got so much improvement still physically in front of me, but I've got so much experience I need to get. I've got so much in terms of mindset that I need to develop, just to be even in the same conversation as these guys I'm racing. So to your point, it was initially, before it became encouraging, it was very discouraging that I had just almost rolled over and played dead so quick. I thought, why was that my natural reaction? I've got to be more resilient than that.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because everyone knows you as they know you now, and to have you go back and talk about this was this big gap, that is interesting.
Yeah, well, I think some people are born naturally confident. I wouldn't say I was a naturally confident person. I wasn't lacking confidence either, but sometimes confidence comes with history. And I didn't have the history of a lot of my competitors who'd come through the junior ranks, making state teams and national teams, having coaches tell them at 14 and 15 and 17 and 19 that you're a really good athlete. Yeah, I didn't have that. So I remember, your question was, what was the most discouraging? And I remember just driving home after that race and just sitting. We went to McDonald's for lunch.
Nice.
My wife and I. And I was just sitting there. I was still sitting in my race kit, actually. And I was just, and it wasn't even the final selection race. It was a selection race for the selection race. And I was just sitting there thinking, what just happened?
Yeah.
And it was really discouraging. And there were other discouraging times too, for different reasons. I mean, as a late starter into the sport, the one thing I did have on my side was that background in, science and physiology from my physio degree. So I knew that with skill acquisition and also with endurance fitness, it's a long process. You don't wake up and say, I'm going to be an endurance athlete now, and you're not going to be world-class this year. It's a long process of accumulating great habits and just accumulating fitness, things that happen on a cellular level in your body that just do not happen overnight. And so I guess I had that on my side. I knew it was going to be a long road, and that I was probably starting a little later. But what I also knew from my studies was that from an endurance standpoint, or heart-lung strength, into your late 20s and 30s, you can still be better than ever. And in fact, you might not even peak until you're 30. So I thought, well, I've got time. The discouraging part came when, other people who had been in the sport longer were getting better results. And I guess our social network, Neri and my social network, other couples our age were doing things like starting families and just socializing more than we were, because I was always training. I was always away on a training camp or at a race. And, we sacrificed a lot, particularly my wife, because I hadn't come through the junior program. I didn't get much support from Triathlon Australia. They said to me early on, we haven't really invested in you. We haven't invested a lot of money in you. We have these other guys and girls we see them as our investments. We've been nurturing, and I understood.
Sure.
They'd have been investing money and time and coaching into these other athletes since they were 15, 16, 17 years of age. And now they're 21, 22. They want to see a return on that investment. So they're going to keep nurturing. So I didn't take it personally. I understood the way sort of a government-funded program worked. They had people to answer to as well. And those people wanted to know, where are the athletes who, we've been spending money on. So,
right.
So I didn't take it personally, but I felt that, we were having to self-fund a lot of my trips, and my wife was doing that. She was working double shifts as an ER nurse, and I felt guilty. I felt very guilty. And I could still see my performances getting better. I could. But I remember a couple of times, once in 1998. So I'd only been out of university 12 months, and I was still only early 20s. and I went and did a World Cup race. And I didn't have a bad race. I think I finished 8th or ninth. I'd snuck into the top 10, which in an ITU World Cup race, pretty good result. Absolutely. Out of a field of 100, 110 guys. But you're not making a lot of money. Like, I think I'd made enough money to cover the airfare and the accommodation. Yeah. And nice. I just remember traveling back to our training base in France and saying to my wife, maybe we're just beating our heads against a wall here. And she'd say, no. Yeah. She could see that I was still improving as an athlete and that I was basing these rash decisions off other things, financial. And then I remember another 12 months later, I did a race. And again, it wasn't a really a poor performance. I think I finished around 8th or 10th again in another world-class field. And, a field that contained multiple world champions and some of the iconic names in our sport who'd come through. And again, I was just chipping away and slowly improving, but not making a lot of money. And I said to Neri, if you want me to retire, I'm happy to retire. I'd rung her, actually. We were at a race up in Queensland and she was home in Sydney. And I said, I really appreciate your support, but if you want me to retire, so we can do other things in life. Yeah. And she said, no, not at all. We're in it together. And, I can see, and she said to me, are you still improving as an athlete? And I said, oh yeah, I'm making some pretty good improvements. She said, well, let's just see where it ends then. So for me, it was important to have that validation and support, emotional support, but also a voice of reason and common sense support, that she could see I was going to make an emotional decision. And she brought it back to, well, I appreciate you thinking that way, but how are you actually performing in this sport? Are you, do you feel you're trending in the right direction? And yeah, so I had that. And that made it a lot easier for me to keep pushing on and to keep doing the work that I had to do. And because, yeah, you hear, and you alluded to it before, people want to talk about the World Championship victories and the pivotal race wins, and they are important in your development. But equally important are the sort of developmental stages and the,
if not more,
the really tough moments where you galvanize yourself and think, okay, well, what actually happened there? And you have those sort of honest self-evaluations or the post-mortem, call it what you will, and you think, well, sometimes you have those conversations with yourself or with your training partners or your coaches, and the performance was actually quite good. It was about where it needed to be, and sometimes it wasn't. It's nowhere near where it needs to be, and you think, okay, well, some changes need to be made, and that's just part of the whole. You hear people, speak about the cliches of the journey and the process, and that's what they're talking about, and that's the really good stuff. That's actually where the magic happens. How many times do you see in sporting events or in business, someone has a huge win or a hugely successful moment, and they really just want to share it with the people who have been along for the ride the whole time, because there's so many moments where it can go one way or the other, and the people closest to you see that.
Well, and just that story of your wife, I think the same thing. My wife has been there so many times when I'm ready to just cash it in. I'm sure a lot of people listening are thinking of a good friend or a parent or a brother or whatever, and that's powerful to know that you have that kind of a buoy in your life is immense. All right, let's touch on this. You are in rare air, my friend. I mean, you've talked about your discouragements and your struggles, but you've won Hawaii 3 times. You've won 70.3 twice, 5-time world champion. What makes you different as an athlete? Because there's really good, there's great, and then you're with a handful of 5 or 6 other people that have done this thing 3 different times. What makes you different?
The difference is I'm probably not that different. I think that.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get the real secrets now.
Well, I often reflect, and when you're in the midst of your career, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. You know the things you need to do day to day to breed success and to cultivate success mentally and physically, and you do those things. And you're always fine-tuning, finessing, evaluating, outsourcing for other opinions and advice. So I think one of the first things is I did that well. I didn't, even though I had this physio degree, I also had a mindset that I'm late to this sport and I need help. And I wasn't scared to get help. I wasn't scared to ask for help. And I wasn't scared to go right to the top either. I would go to the athletes who I admired and try and train with them. And I was lucky. Some of the greatest athletes our sport has seen have become personal friends and were mentors. So I had access to good people, and people were always so gracious and wanted to help me as well. And that's never lost on me. You need good help. You need good help. You hear people talk about the strength of the team, and that's so important. Over a long journey, you need to surround yourself with the right people and with good people. And I think I did that. And it started at home. But then there were layers and layers of really good people who helped me, coaches, my manager, training partners, sponsors who became friends and who became very invested in the journey. And I just got great help. And when you feel that love, it inspires you to be your best and to overcome. Initially my motivations were very personal, fulfilling potential. And then later in life, as you change as a person, motivations change as well. Becoming a husband and a father, I was very aware of the sacrifices the family had made. It was very, very easy for me to push myself every day because of that. It was very easy for me to, squeeze every drop out of every session every day. And in races, I would often think of particular moments and hardships that the family had when we were away from home and away from family. And I knew what a sacrifice that was for my wife. And the homeschooling for the kids wasn't always easy. And so I think I was always aware of the people around me and what they contributed. And I think to your question, what differentiated me, I was self-aware as well. I think I understood myself and what I needed. And that's a twofold need. What you need physically to improve, because every athlete's different, but we're also different emotionally and mentally. And I think I got an understanding pretty early on from training with different athletes who'd won world titles that there's a lot of similarities, but there are also differences as well. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And, one of the things I kept hearing when I first broke into the pro ranks, and then after 10 years racing Olympic distance and half Ironmans predominantly on the US and Europe circuit, then I stepped up to Ironman racing. I would seek advice from other athletes who'd won the races that I wanted to win. And you would hear the same theme when I would ask them questions, which was, we can tell you what we did, but you're going to have to tweak it and work out what works for you. And that's not only with the training, that's with everything. So I think I understood it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, and that I'm going to need to be very self-aware of the kind of training and physical preparation I'm going to need. But probably more importantly, because again, having that physio and that background in physiology, I understood that at the highest level in any sport, the physical characteristics are very similar amongst all the people vying for the world titles.
Exactly.
The top 1% of the top 1%.
You're all the same.
Similar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much. And are training the same way and often train together, some of them.
Right.
So there were many times I was training in San Diego or Colorado or in Europe, and you'd be training with the people you actually had to go on and race. Right. So I became aware that there's going to have to be something else that differentiates me from the others on the start line. And part of that is, I think, is an awareness of race dynamics and tactics. But for me, the biggest part was, well, we've all raced each other so much. We know our strengths and weaknesses, and we know our opponent's strengths and weaknesses. And, everyone always talks about, I guess, the result. And the result's wonderful. I mean, sport, like business, it's results driven. And that's what we, I guess, grade ourselves on. And ultimately, I mean, that's why I'm here talking to you, because I had some good wins. I was able to win some world titles. And I'm not just talking about a couple of gallant top 20 finishes. It's more than that. But I guess what you understand and what I understood was the only place that I can really make a difference to the result is in the front end, the process of preparing physically and mentally. So I think the biggest thing that I knew right from the beginning, even as I was learning about the sport of triathlon, was that I'm not the kind of person who wants to have regrets ever. So I'm going to do everything I can while I have an opportunity. And then looking back in 10, 20, 30 years, I'll be comfortable that maybe the results didn't always play out the way I wanted them to. And it's interesting because people always talk about the 5 world titles. I most often think about the 2 or 3 silver medals at world titles that probably should have been. Well, so I think more about those than the gold medals.
We all do, my friend.
Yeah. So, but I just understood that, I didn't want to have the kind of career shoulda, woulda, coulda. I would have done that. I just knew my personality. I didn't deal with regrets, and I didn't want to have to deal with them. So I have an opportunity now to lay a great platform and foundation where I won't have to do that. I mean, there's always going to be situations where you look back and say, well, we've learned a lot since that race, and maybe the decision-making might be a little different. Hindsight is an amazing thing. You learn a lot with experience. But at that time, I was as physically and mentally prepared as I could have been. And that's one thing I think I can say with pretty much every race I did. Certainly there were mistakes made, and, races play out a certain way. There's luck involved too. But you have to be in a position that where if you do get some luck, you're able to capitalize on it. There's no point getting lucky if you're coming 200th.
Yeah.
And you also have to be in a place where you're good enough to overcome bad luck as well, because you get equal measures of those things. So, but I just felt, I'm not even going to worry about the good luck in the bad. It's going to come. What I'm going to worry about is the things that I can do to be in the absolute best place I can be. And for me, every race was a world championship. So that was another thing with my mindset. I didn't, as much as you set a race schedule and you have your A races, every time I got on a start line, for me, it was like a world title. I had to, I didn't want to be the kind of athlete who used races to prepare for other races. I could do simulated training sessions for that. I raced to race. And there's no question racing bumps your fitness up a little bit. And, you schedule a season so that when you get to that very, very peak of fitness, you want it to be in September, October when the championship races are on. But if I was racing in March at a regional championships or June, it didn't matter to me. It was a world championship that I had to win, or I had to perform at. Right. That was always my mindset. I have to perform at every single race. So there were no.
Well, and as you're saying that, I'm hearing, so that probably made me more successful on the big stage, because it was always a big stage. Kona wasn't different for you. Kona was another race. The 70.3 championship wasn't, oh my gosh, it's the champion. It was, here we go again. Let's do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think I conditioned myself physically and mentally exactly that. So there was never, as I was going to say, just cruising through a schedule, waiting to get to the bigger races or going through the motion. And that even extended back into training. It was never just going through the motions. It was always with purpose and intent. Some sessions are hard cardiovascularly, others are more technical in terms of you're doing drills and technique-based work. Some are speed sessions, some are strength. Whatever it was, each session had its purpose and its goals and its parameters, and I was hitting them 100%. I was in that mindset because, you practice that. I mean, I think, and maybe you can enlighten us because this is your area of expertise, the way the mind works, and we're all different again, but I guess there are a few people who can just get to the Super Bowl and turn it on, flick it on and off like a switch. But we learn with routines and habits, and I just wanted to be in that groove of where I'm in a lead up to a race. I have to do everything every day. I have to check all the boxes every day, from training to sleep, nutrition. I'm checking all the boxes, and I'm not going through the motions. I'm not coasting. And then I get to this race, my taper has to be on point. Race preparation the day before race day, and it just becomes autopilot. And Kona is a big thing, and it's like the Super Bowl of triathlon, if you want to use that analogy. But I always took comfort in that it was just part of my routine, and it was practiced to a high level every single time, even in training. If I was doing a race simulation, I would set my nutrition out and my gear bags out the day before, just like I used to do for the big races and for all the races. So I think there's comfort in that when, you're leading in race week in Kona and everybody's nervous. For me, there was a lot of habits and routines that were very similar.
You just kept.
And I took comfort in all of those things because I thought, this is just another week.
Yeah.
It's a big week, but it's a week that I've lived through before, and I know exactly what to expect and what to do. And yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Love that. All right. Speaking of different athletes, I'm intrigued. I didn't realize you and Mac were born the same year in Australia. So obviously your careers were destined to parallel each other a little bit. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I think a lot of folks feel like you gave us the Dodgers-Yankees rivalry, probably the best since Mark and Dave were battling out there. Can you pull back the curtain, just share some things that maybe people don't realize about that relationship or some of that stuff that's going on behind the scenes that maybe, folks aren't familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, Chris was a great athlete, and we had a rivalry on the course, but we had a rivalry off the course as well.
Which made it even more fun.
Yeah, well, I guess it did. I guess it did for those watching, and people who were in the know knew. We used to train together, and we were friends, and then we weren't friends. We had a business that didn't end well, and I'm not going to go into the details. They say usually somewhere in the middle. So, but yeah, we just went our separate ways, and I don't think we liked each other. I didn't respect Chris on the race course. I respected his ability for sure, but I think it's like any workplace. There's you have to go to work and you try and respect people, but sometimes you just don't like them. And I would like to think at some point, maybe in the future, we can get together. It's a shame because, as you say, we live in the same suburb now too.
Do you really?
Far
wow.
Yeah, and we just I catch up with a lot of the guys I used to race and the girls I used to train with. And that's been one of the hardest things for me this year with not traveling, is seeing a lot of the friends on the circuit who you trained with and raced against and became friends with, shared weddings and the birth of children. And, you form really good lifelong friendships and relationships with a lot of people. But yeah, Chris and I didn't have that. We just went our separate ways, and yeah, which was a shame. And there was a lot of stuff that went on in the media too that I know Chris was always very vocal in the media.
Right. You two couldn't be any more different. At least from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah. And people handle things differently and deal with things differently and are different. I mean, I can say categorically, I never had a problem with Chris's confidence at all. I mean, you have to be confident. Every athlete who performs well has a self-confidence and they get the job done. My confidence was just an inner confidence. I didn't feel like I had to, go to the press conference and pump myself up or break others down. And that was one of the problems I had with Chris too. I remember the first press conference I went to in Kona in 2007. He was unloading on Farris and he was unloading on Norman. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, they've both won here, and he and I haven't. At that point, he and I had not won in Kona, and they both had. And I had thoughts about those guys as athletes. I thought they were very good. Of course they were. They'd won, but I didn't feel I had to denigrate others to build myself up. I knew where my confidence came from, and maybe Chris had to. I don't know. Only he can answer those questions, why he said some of the things he said in those press conferences or, but we were just different people. And again, not better or worse, just different. It comes back to the self-awareness. Maybe Chris felt that that's how he would get the best out of himself, to put it out there and make it public. And then he felt more of a pressure to live up to that then. So, and it certainly worked because he was able to perform on the biggest stages. So, I think part of my, opinion where it comes to Chris was based on a lot of the personal stuff and the stuff that people didn't see. When you train with someone and you race against them, you see things that others mightn't see. And certainly our relationship up to the point where we raced in the US and we didn't race a lot, to be honest, towards the I mean, when I came to the US the first time in 2002, that was the year he stepped up to Ironman racing. So we didn't really race all that much. I was more racing guys like Craig Walton, Greg Bennett, Simon Whitfield, Simon Lessing, Matt Reed. They were the guys who were Hamish Carter, Bevan Doherty. They were the guys racing Lifetime Fitness. They were the guys racing in Chicago and LA. Javier Gomez sort of started coming over in, I think, 05, 06. And then that was the year that I then stepped up. 07, I stepped up to Kona. So we certainly didn't race each other too much, and we didn't cross paths too much. But yeah, you'd hear things in the media, and there was always, mutual friends. You'd hear things. And yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame that post-career now, I mean, sport was a big part of our lives, but it's not the only thing in life. There's so many other things that are important. When I look back on my career, one of the things that I guess I miss is the interactions with other athletes and your peer group. The people you race and train with become your colleagues and your peer group. And then when you go into other areas of your life, you miss those people. You form good relationships with them. So that's one of the things I miss. And I also miss the feeling of just being a high performance athlete and preparing, that whole preparation and thought that goes into it. And it becomes your day-to-day priority of, sharpening your tools physically and mentally every single day. And every thought is about that. And I miss that. I miss that mindset. But back to the situation with Macca. Yeah, I mean, hopefully one day we can sit down, and I think things are more amicable now than perhaps they once were, but we're certainly not friends. And it is a shame because we did a lot of the same things in sport, and it's an interesting story. We trained in the same areas, we live in the same suburb, but maybe that's why the rivalry was what it was. Maybe you can't have two big fish in a small pond, right. Not enough room.
Right. Yeah, could be. All right. So mental toughness, we're going to chat about this a little bit. You and I have traded some emails about it. I remember in 11 when you were heading for the all-time course record and suddenly you have these cramps in your legs. Walk us through, what was going through your head when you're thinking, and I don't know if you were thinking about the time, but I know people had made you aware that you had a chance at it, and all of a sudden you get these cramps in your hammies and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't remember, you were like 2 miles out or something. You were right at the end. Walk us through that. What was going on and what was going on in here?
Yeah, I was aware of the time and I wasn't. I was sort of in other places mentally. And it was a tough race because it wasn't as easy conditions as I'd experienced at that rate. And it's never easy conditions.
Sure,
when you hear people talk about the conditions in Kona, it's relative. It's always at the hard end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
I'd raced in hotter conditions. But that year, it just seemed to be a combination of a little bit of heat, humidity, and the wind up. We got the Maui winds out of the north that year. And yeah, I knew I was having a good race. I was in a good place. I'd won the 70.3 Worlds a month before. I knew the fitness was good, and I had used a different race tactic that day as well, which was very satisfying. I'd gone off the front on the bike with a couple of other guys, and I think I hit the run course in second place. And the front group, which was the group I used to get off the bike with, or typically I would, was about 6 minutes behind getting off the bike. So, and I felt comfortable early in the marathon, but yeah, Andreas Raylert made the run very uncomfortable in the middle. And he went at a pace that was a crazy pace. It was suicide pace, but I responded. He kept closing the gap. And you talk about the mental side of sport. Andreas is a guy who I had the utmost respect for, had incredible work ethic. His training regime was often talked about amongst all the other pros, how much training he used to do. He performed at all levels of the sport. He'd been to 2 Olympic Games, maybe 3. I think he had a couple of top 5s or a couple of top 10s at least at the Olympic Games. He'd podiumed at 70.3 Worlds. Now he'd stepped up to Ironman. And, in 2011, I think that was his 3rd race in Kona. And usually someone's 2nd or 3rd or 4th race in Kona is their best.
That's the go time.
Because they've built, yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, he's in the sweet spot. He'd already had a 3rd and a 2nd as well. So he was trending in the right direction. And he was just making this concerted charge at me in the middle of the marathon. And I was getting the splits. Actually, I was getting the splits from his younger brother, Michael, who was out on the course, and who was one of my competitors as well. I'd had a couple of really good duels with Michael at half Ironman distance, and Michael was giving me splits, and he was closing the time down rapidly, and I was running at a pace that was the pace I was holding in the marathon was course record pace for the marathon. I was running at about 2:36 marathon pace. And this guy's actually, it was even quicker than that earlier on, and he was taking time out of me.
Pause just for a second. For the non-triathletes out there, he just said 2:36 pace. That's after a 2.4 mile swim and a 112 mile bike, starting in the middle of the day. You're not starting a marathon at 7 a.m. He's starting in the middle of the day after doing all this stuff. So, okay, back to our regular scheduled show here.
Yeah, so I'm getting these splits that Michael's running, I don't know, 15 to 20 seconds a mile out of me. And I'm thinking, you know, we are both going to pay for this. But one thing that was front of mind for me was he's a very hungry guy who's had a third and a second at this race. He's very experienced now, and he's making a charge. He knew what he was doing. And I have just a lot of belief in the power of the mind. And I thought, forget what the record books show, that no one's ever run this pace before. If this guy gets in a position, I mean, he's not so crazy either that he's going to hold that pace the whole marathon. I just thought he's going to hold that pace and get close and get within striking distance. And then he'll regulate his pace down a little bit. But my fear was once he gets in a position where, you know, the victory is in sight, people lift mentally. I've seen it my whole career. People do superhuman things where you think the body's certainly not capable of that, but the mind just takes it to a place that, you know, you see it in all sports. Yeah. You hear stories of people talking about superhuman strength at car accidents and moving cars. And I just have a lot of belief in the power of the mind. The mind rules the body. The mind has all these governors that in our everyday lives come in handy so that we don't hurt ourselves. But the very good athletes in all sports override those and go to a place that most other athletes don't go to. And these governors often kick in where there's going to be no damage, but they're set so that you don't hurt yourself. I guess as an endurance athlete, you don't push yourself so hard for so long that you have a heart attack. But the really good athletes are able to override these governors and really just push themselves into a place that others don't even get to. And I'd seen it, and I thought Andreas he just had that look in his eye that year. I thought he wants to get within striking distance, and then he'll regulate his pace. And you know, I don't want him to get anywhere near where it's even a possibility that he may win. And I had this 6-minute buffer that came down to about, I don't know what it was, 3 minutes. So I thought I'm going to hold it there. So I ran at his pace, Sam, to hold it at 3 minutes. And we ran like that for 6 miles. Wow. It was a prolonged, painful, and I thought I'm going to pay for this. But behind Andreas was about 7 or 8 minutes back to third spot. So I thought, where I am, I've just got to get to about mile 20. If I blow up at mile 20, I've held off Andreas and he's already blown up, then I think I can get to the finish from there. So I saw off Andreas's push, lasted about 6 miles. And I remember it was at about mile 15. I finally started getting splits at the gaps now going out again. It was going out again at a rapid rate. So he'd completely blown up, and we still had 10 miles to run. And I thought, okay, I can back my pace off now. So I backed it off to the pace that I'd planned on running. And I thought, oh, this is not comfortable either, because I've gone into the red here. I've revved into the red a little too long.
Those matches are burned.
Yeah. And I thought, there's no need to panic. I mean, I just sort of consolidated for the next 5 miles and got to mile 20 and started feeling okay again. But your question was, what was going through my mind when I started cramping? The first thing that went through my mind is how unprofessional I had been, because at about mile 20, we go through special needs, and I just started feeling good again. I'd seen off Andreas' 6 mile push. I'd had another 5 miles on the back of that where I started feeling okay again. And I ran through special needs. I didn't grab my salt tablets, and I started feeling good. We get to the turnaround in the energy lab. I had a big lead. So I'm not even thinking about the record. I was so relieved I'd seen off Andreas's really, and it was a world-class tilt at the title he had that year. I mean, and you'd expect nothing less. I had a lot of fondness for Andreas because in 2009, now I'm going to tell a little anecdote here, but in 2009, I'd won in 08 the year before, so I'm defending champion, and it's his first Kona. So he's raced in, I think he'd come second, he'd either won or come second at 70.3 Worlds the year before. And I knew his record at ITU. He'd medaled at World Junior Champs in Olympic distance racing. He'd had top 10 finishes at Olympic Games. So I knew his pedigree. And we're in the midst of the race in 09. And there was a little front group of us away. And there was a few guys off the front. That was the year Chris Lieto really took off the front.
Yeah.
And so we get to the turn at Harvey. We're about 60 miles in to the bike ride, 100 kilometers into the bike ride for those who work in metric. And for those who know the race, when you make the turn at Harvey, you come up a little rise, and that's where special needs is on the bike. And we had a little group, and it always happens usually the year after an Olympic year when a lot of the ITU guys and girls come into Ironman racing and half Ironman racing, the swim gets quicker. And I knew it would. So I'd planned for it accordingly and upped my swimming a little bit for 09. And there was a little breakaway group in the swim that had a lot of the guys who'd come from the ITU the year before. So Andy Raylert, Rasmus Henning from Denmark, Dirk Bockel, Andy Potts from the US, who'd come from the ITU circuit, and a lot of really elite swimmers. So I did a lot of swimming that year and was able to get myself into that front group. I think there were 6 or 7 of us. And at different parts of the race, Lieto came through and took off. And I think Marino van Hunacker from Belgium, he rode through as well. So we get to Harvey. We're still a group of 6 or 7 guys. And there was another group coming from behind, the second group, which typically happened in Kona. And that was a group that had Norman in it. It had Cam Brown. Macca was in that group. So they got out of the swim about three minutes behind us. So we go through special needs. And what you do is you call out your number as you go past them on the way into Harvey, and they get your special needs bag. So I was number 1. I've called out number 1, go through special Harvey, come out, and normally you get eye contact with one of the volunteers, and this guy grabbed my bag, and he held it up. He saw it was me, and then he looked and he realized he'd grabbed bag number 11, not bag number 1.
No.
And so he's run back and grabbed my bag, but as he was running back, I'd gone through because I was on the front of the group.
Sure.
And so I thought, I'm not going to get special needs this year. Anyway, about half a mile later, as we just crest this little hill, we're about to start the big descent out of Harvey, Andy Raylert comes pedaling up next to me with my special needs bag in his hand.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So he had his own special needs bag around he'd put it over his head like a domestique that you see them doing the Tour de France, and he put my bag in his mouth and rode up to me. And yeah, those sorts of things you never forget.
That's huge.
And he didn't have to do that, but he did it. And we talked about it after the race. I thanked him, obviously, and he said, he said it just so happened that the guy who had your bag came back just as I was getting there, and I could see the next guy had my bag. He said it was. I mean, he played it down. Obviously, he's a gentleman. A very humble human being. But he said it was very easy for me to grab both, and it was no problem at all. But it helped my race enormously. So you don't forget those things. So I had a lot of respect for Andy. And so when we made, fast forward 2 years, back to our story, I digress, I know, but I've seen off his charge. Now we're in the energy lab. I've made the turn, and I could see he was hurting, and I was starting to increase my lead again. And I just thought, well, I hope he hangs on for second. I mean, he'd rolled the dice and tried to win, and he was now hurting, and we still had we had a bit more than 6 miles at that point. Yeah, at the bottom of the energy lab, you've probably got 8 miles to go. So, yeah, I thought, oh, he's still got a long way to go. He's hurting. I hope he hangs on. I really want him to hang on and get second. And as it was, he did. He held on and got third. So he still got the podium. But I was starting to feel good at that point at the bottom of the energy lab. So I've run through special needs on the run, which comes a little bit after the turn in the energy lab. And I knew it was a mistake almost immediately. I got about half a mile past and I started getting twinges in my legs. You know, before you get a cramp, you get the little heads up that you're about to get a cramp.
Look out, here we come.
The muscles are twitching and quivering. And I was like, why did I not grab my special needs? I mean, just a mistake, a mental mistake that I made. And so that's what I was thinking when I started to cramp up. I thought, well, you know, you deserve this. You deserve this. I mean, you reap what you sow. So I just thought I just have to manage it. So I was trying to slow my pace down, do all the little things that you can do to prolong the period before the cramp sets in. So I slowed my pace a little bit. I shortened my stride, so I wasn't putting as much length through the muscles. I wasn't taking them right through their range, and I was slowing down through the aid stations, trying to get a lot more electrolyte drink. But once you get into that position where you're really depleted, it's a slippery slope after that. Yeah. So, I started cramping probably 7 kilometers from the finish, but I was able to just run with it. But yeah, I had to stop and stretch out 1.5 miles from the finish, and then again 1 mile from the finish, 2K from the finish at the top of Palani. And at that point, I wasn't even thinking about the record. I was just...
I'm yelling at the computer screen. I'm like, come on, Crowie, you got this, buddy. Oh my gosh.
I had a good friend who was right there. He just happened to be watching the race at the top of where Palani and the Queen K meet at that intersection. And he's like, come on, you've got the record. And
it's right there.
For a minute, it didn't register. I'm like, record? What's he talking about? I've just got to get to the finish. And then when I got down on the Leahy Drive, I heard Mike Riley say, oh, it's still in play. The record's still in play. So I really picked it up the last 400 meters. But yeah, it was painful. And, you know, I always try to take ownership in those situations. It was my fault. So I was like, you got to deal with it, buddy boy. I mean, you brought this on yourself, and there's things you can do, you know, to manage it. It wasn't pleasant, and it was quite painful because I had to stop a few times. And running down Palani, I had to stop in the motorbike. The TV motorbike nearly ran up the back of me. But yeah, I just had to deal with it and manage it. It's part of racing. It's something that you hope doesn't happen, but it does happen a lot. So it's like getting a flat tire in the car. You know, it can happen. You don't want it to happen. It's not ideal, but if it does, you got to change the tire. So I was trying to change the tires.
So, all right. Speaking of changing tires, we got a lot of masters athletes listening to this. You're, I believe, 47 right now. So you're approaching that 50. You've raced very successfully even the last several years. What different things are you doing now as you approach 50? What are you planning to do as you move through your mid 50s to continue to be as successful as you are?
Yeah, I think the first thing is understand mentally, you know, the things that you need to do and the things that will make your experience a happy and successful one for you. And only each athlete and each person knows what those benchmarks are. And for me, it was accepting that training is not my day-to-day priority anymore, but performance is still important to me. So my whole life and my whole year is not geared around racing anymore. But when I do race, I get that opportunity to do it the way that I want to do it. Make sure I check all the boxes that have always been important to me, because performance, and particularly high performance, is still very important to me. I don't just want to be making up the numbers. I want to get the very most out of myself, and I know what I'm capable of. So I need to be able to do that. So that's the first thing, you know, and then prioritize, understand, you know, the things that you have in your weekly routine, your daily routine, and in your life that are important. And for a masters athlete, that's family, that's work commitments. You need to be realistic about the amount of time that you can commit to your training and stick to that. You know, consistency is important. So understand how your days and your weeks are going to be spent, and the things that you have to do, your commitments. And I think you'll find a much more sustainable outlook mentally and a much more manageable life if you're just realistic about the things that are important and the things that you have to do and plan accordingly. So that's the first thing, the mental side of it and the planning side of it. From a physical standpoint, we're not what we used to be. That's not to say we're not good. We can still, in a cardiovascular sport, in an endurance sport, you can still into your late 30s, 40s, and even 50s be world class.
Yeah.
The body has to be managed though. You need more recovery. You lose strength and speed, so you need to put a focus on that in your training, because the endurance will be there. The years and years of training, the endurance will be there. But you need to look after your body. So that might mean more sleep, eating a certain way, supplemental recovery, whether it's massage, compression therapy, ice bars. But you need to be real. Think of the masters athlete, the 40s and 50s athlete, as a Pinto chassis with a Jaguar V12 engine. The engine is going to be there.
I'm having trouble picturing that.
You need to make sure the Pinto chassis is looked after and needs a lot of body work and a lot of TLC. The engine will be strong. So, you just need to be mindful of more sleep. And we don't need to train the way we used to in terms of volume, because what volume and that aerobic training does is build a huge aerobic platform, which you need, which now you have. Hopefully, if you've been doing triathlon for 5 years or 10 years, some athletes I meet in their 50s and 60s have been doing triathlon for 25 years. Yeah. So if that's you, you have a lot of aerobic conditioning. And now if you're new to the sport at that age, you're going to have to do some aerobic conditioning, which you can't fast track, and you're not going to be able to do the strength and speed that you might have been able to do in your 20s either. And that's okay. That's okay. We're all working within the realms of our own limitations and our own strengths as well. So I would just say that the engine is good. So there's no reason to be despondent and lower your expectations or your goals in terms of thinking, I'm an older guy now, no, or an older lady even. No. Set the bar high. Set the bar high, but manage your body, manage your training, manage your recovery.
I love hearing you say that. I've got one more question for you, be kind of a closer. But before we do that, folks that are hearing you and they're saying, man, I'd like to have this guy coach me. You've got Sanzigo coaching going. What's the best way for people to look you up or track you down or keep track of what you're up to?
Yeah, follow us on social media, and I've got a website, www.sensigo.co. I've actually just taken over the business myself the last 6 months. I was a partner in it, but now I'm running the show, I guess, and that's been a learning experience. So, I've just redone the website, so check that out. It's only just gone live, and we're still making some little final changes with those things, as is always the way. But check it out. We've got some good things going on. I've got some great coaches who work with the business. I think some of the best endurance coaches in triathlon and in all endurance sports have had experience with Olympians and world champions, but they've had just as much or even more experience with age group athletes and masters athletes and first timers, which for me, that's what makes our coaches really good. And a really good coach obviously has a wealth of knowledge and they know the science, but they have experience implementing that in each individual situation.
With people. That personal side.
Yeah. Because as I said, all athletes, we're all people, and we're different emotionally and mentally, and we're different physically. Yeah. We have different backgrounds in terms of our length of years in the sport. And also we're different in terms of how many hours per week we can commit to the sport right now and what our goals are. So we've got some good coaches. We've also got an online community, which is fun. And I've written a lot of generic programs. Some athletes don't want to coach. I've noticed particularly in the US, a lot of athletes who are college athletes and quite high level in either swimming, cycling or running, and then go off and work and come back. A lot of people find our sport in their 30s and 40s,
totally.
Which is one of the great things about triathlon. It's a sport for life.
Yep.
So those athletes have they've attained quite a high level in maybe one of the individual sports, and they know the discipline of training, and they know how to follow a training regime or a training plan. A lot of those athletes just want a plan. They just need a guide. They don't need somebody looking over their shoulder. So we have training plans as well. And, pre-COVID, we actually had a lot of training camps. I've run training camps in North America, in Kona, in Boulder. We've had some in Arizona. We've had some in Canada. We've had some in South America, Colombia, Sao Paulo. We've had camps in Europe, in Mallorca, in Spain. So our plan, again, next year or whenever all the international boundaries open up, is to run just training experiences, training camps where I bring 1 or 2 coaches with me, and we go to a place and we train for 2 or 3 days. And, I let you in on the secret, which is there's no secret. It's consistent training over time. It's making it manageable and sustainable. It's having fun. It's understanding as an athlete what you need in terms of your sleep patterns, your nutrition, whatever event you're training for, making your training specific to that, and making it sociable and fun as well. I mean, we talked about 10,000 hours, or how many hours it takes to improve and become world class. It's a long commitment, so you want to make it fun as well and manageable. So, yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Our camps help do that.
Well, and for anybody who has not tried a camp like that in some format, it is so powerful. I can't even tell you. It's a great experience. All right, parting words of wisdom. Those looking, and you don't have to go triathlon here. You don't even have to go fitness. Just your parting words of wisdom. Pull it into a tweet length or whatever you want, in terms of people looking for better than yesterday, people looking to make tomorrow a little bit better than today. What's the Crowie wisdom?
Learn.
Always learn.
Always be learning. Always be a student. Don't be scared to ask questions. Know yourself. Understand what's worked universally for others, but make it specific to you. Be self-aware. Surround yourself with good people always, and understand what makes them tick. You're going to get the best out of each other if you understand what makes the people around you tick and what lights their fire.
Love it. Crowie, thank you so much. It's a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Man, thank you for having me on. It has been good fun, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Take care. There are plenty of great athletes who disappoint when you meet them. But I have a feeling most of us now feel the exact opposite about Craig Crowie Alexander. Such a class act on so many fronts. Thanks for tuning in to the #1 podcast for health and wellness coaching. Next week's guest is Dr. Kieran Dunstan. It's a big-time right turn for us from this week's episode. She's a functional medicine physician who specializes in the healthy treatment and optimization of menopause. It's a discussion packed with practical, healthy insights, and we frankly expect it to be one of our most downloaded episodes. So stay tuned for that one. Thanks for all your support. One way you can really help us out is to share the podcast with a friend. We completely depend on word of mouth for the growth of what we're doing here, and so we really appreciate it when you do. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions about your current or future coaching career. Results at catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or check out the website, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. This is Dr. Bradford Cooper of the Catalyst Coaching Institute, and now it's our turn to get out there and be a catalyst. I'll speak with you soon on another episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.